environmental change caused or influenced by people, either directly or indirectly. Anthropogenic process types are defined as being intentional, non-malicious human activities. For example, it includes groundwater abstraction, subsurface mining, vegetation removal, chemical explosion, and infrastructure loading. So Anthropocene epoch is an unofficial unit of geologic time used to describe the most recent period in Earth's history, when human activity started to have significant impact on planet's climate and ecosystem. So when did the Anthropogenic era start? So the Anthropogenic era is generally thought to have begun 150 to 200 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution began producing carbon dioxide and other gases at rates sufficient to alter their compositions in the atmosphere. So, the part one, title Foundation of Islamic Economics, comprises 5 chapters. So, first chapter described economics and religion, and mentioned that both the concepts are inseparable. So first chapter talked about the role of Khalifa. So this chapter discussed the nature in general. What is nature? What are the resources available in the nature that Allah produced for humanity to describe the resources on earth, but did not focus on anthropogenic angle. So do human economic actions affect the nature? So this is missing in this chapter. Is there need to learn from different cycles of
Abdul,
nature?
just let me record it. Oh, it is recording. Okay, Shukran.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nature believes in zero waste. So should we incorporate embedded approach? It will not be wise to talk in detail but anthropogenic aspect in a pure Islamic theoretical book. But it worth to give some policy guidelines about anthropogenic issues. So in this chapter, so book missed the opportunity to mention the anthropogenic angle with respect to nature. So in this chapter 2, book described the characteristics, scopes, and methodology of Islamic economics. So Islamic economics as a multidisciplinary science, but the book, this chapter of the book did not mention the anthropogenic aspect in this chapter, while it mentioned the other uh, sciences as well. So in the chapter 3, book mentioned theory building in Islamic economics, sources of knowledge,
Abdul
theory.
Basit, Abdul Basit, who is Abdullah et al. 2018?
Sir, the book is written by 28 authors. So I
Or this
was,
chapter is written by him.
yeah, this
Does
is
it
the
mean?
first author.
Oh, he is the first author. Okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right.
So that's why
Okay,
I just mentioned a first author with at all.
okay, okay, okay.
So
Chapter 3.
chapter 3 mentioned the about the theory building in Islamic economics, sources of knowledge, theory and explanation, approaching of theory building in Islamic economics. So, but embedded economics theory is missing in this chapter that can be talked about all the stakeholders. In chapter 4, the book mentioned about the ethics and Islamic economics. So, ethics can cover the environmental issues as well. So, it is unethical to waste the resources, and it is also not recommended in economical angle as well. So religion can play a role to resolve the anthropogenic issue. Is for example, the religion guides about israf, tabzir, cleanliness are important values, ethical values with respect to anthropogenic dimensions. In chapter 5, the book mentioned economic systems, philosophical and operational foundations of economic system, history of Islamic economic system, history of capitalism, recent changing types of capitalism should be incorporated in the book in this chapter. So that talks about the stakeholder capitalism, etc. So this chapter also mentioned socialism as well. In chapter 6, which is part 2 of this book, that described about the Islamic microeconomics. It mentioned about conventional and Islamic microfinance, gave uh, differences between both the systems, different markets in Islamic microfinance, rational choice, classification of needs in Islam, balanced spending in Islam, demand and supply equilibrium, and elasticity concept in this chapter. So, in chapter 7, the book mentioned consumption, philosophy, and objectives of consumption, general principles on consumption, moderation, prioritization in consumption, permissible and non permissible items for consumption, conceptual framework for consumer behavior. So, according to this chapter, there is need to mention the ecological dimension in it, avoiding plastic, unnecessary prints of, for example, in the month of Ramadan. So, unnecessary prints of Ramadan calendar, consumer behavior with respect to Islamic and conventional dimensions. So, while describing the consumer behavior, so these all the points with respect to ecological dimension should be kept in mind. So, in chapter 8, production, philosophy of production, producer as Khalifa of Allah, ultimate objective of production, factors of production, producer behavior. So, but in this chapter, discussed the prosperity of earth. The chapter discussed the tapping the or using the unexploited resources. So, book missed the opportunity to mention the anthropogenic aspects in the heading. So, producers should avoid coal and other related uh, products to protect the ecological system. So producers should it should be mentioned in this chapter that producers should avoid any activity that causes or creates bad impact for the environment. In chapter 9, it talks about the distribution, income distribution, goals of income distribution, nature of inequalities, marginal productivity theory, and distribution, wages in Islam. So, in chapter 10, book mentioned market and economic system, rationale of market, market in Islam, market structure, perfect competition, Islamic view on perfect competition, monopoly and oligopoly with conventional and Islamic perspective, guiding principles of government intervention in the market. So under this chapter, so book missed the mentioning the role of Al Hisba can play a good role, can supervise the anthropogenic malpractices that uh, create a bad impact for environment. So under mentioning Al Hisba, so there should be a anthropogenic protection as well. So the
Abdul,
priorities.
Abdul Basit,
Yes, sir.
just for making an emphasis, if you are thinking of selecting a topic for your paper or something, it's a good topic to the role of Hisba in the anthropogenic era.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Inshallah.
Okay, so don't
Yes, sir.
forget that it's a very good topic.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Inshallah. So, HISPA can provide a good opportunity in under Islamic economics to protect the environment as well. So, the priorities in selection of the production in public and private sector. For example, a Kahf can be established to create awareness in in masses about anthropogenic issues. So a cough can be used for environmental protection as well. So let's talk about the strength of the book. This book is the contribution of 28 minds. So it is supposed more credible and acceptable for all than other Islamic economics books. So this book holistically mentioned the different aspects of Islamic economics with comparison of conventional economics. So MCQs are given at the end. Thought-provoking questions at the end of the book are given. So what are the missing points in this book? That as sustainable development goals are discussed in the book, but it should be there is need to talk in comprehensive manner. So permanent destruction of natural capitals, geology, soil, air, water, as a result of anthropogenic issues are not covered in the book. Species extinction or reduction are not discussed in the book because these are also the resources that should be discussed. Failure of the government and business to enforce an act or invest in effective climate change adoption and mitigation measure, preserve ecosystem protection population. So these are the missing points in the book. So damage to the ecosystem, destruction of the property and financial loss at a global scale is not mentioned in the book. So loss of human life, damage to ecosystem as a result of human activity or failure to coexist with animal ecosystem. So deregulation of protected areas, industrial accidents, oil spills that affect the environment. So radioactive contamination, wildlife trade is missing in the book. So other these are the further points that are missing in the book. So chemical, food, mineral, water, or other natural resources crisis at a global scale as a result of human over exploitation and mismanagement of natural resources is not mentioned or discussed in the book. So these are my suggestions that there should be a separate chapter for ecological and anthropogenic issues. So the concept of embedded economy can be given while describing the other economic concepts. So there is a need to mention the stakeholder capitalism rather to just mentioning the capitalism vis-a-vis Islamic economics that care about all stakeholders as well. So this was all about my part. So thank you, sir. So now I hand over my presentation to my colleague, brother Sharfuddin. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Very
you,
good,
Brother
very
Abdul
good.
Basit. Brother Abdul Basit, please keep moving the slides.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I will
Walaikum
proceed with the
salam.
last part of the book, which is the part 3, talking about the Islamic macroeconomics. This part comprises 6 chapters from 11 until 16. The 11th chapter covers the introduction to Islamic macroeconomics, which is include macroeconomic concept, definition, scope, and objective, and provide the abstract view of what Islamic macroeconomic is about. The chapter 12 discuss the nominal output concept and the measures of well-being. The next chapter highlights the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model and appreciate the relevance of classical and Keynesian macroeconomic theory for developing an Islamic macroeconomic model. The 14th chapter discuss fiscal policy from the Islamic economic perspective, but also provide an understanding of the conventional fiscal framework. Can you move? The chapter 15 covered the development of money, its function, use as a policy tool, and implication to the real economy. It also deliberates on how the Islamic monetary policy would be different from the mainstream policy. The 16th chapter discussed the evolution of the trade theories, explaining why nations trade with each other and the impact of the trade on economy. So this was the third part. The fourth part of the book include the three chapters from 17 until 19. The 17th chapter discussed the contemporary finance system and actual economy. It highlights the role and types of finance institutions, market, and its regulations. It also discussed the function of Islamic system and its linkage with real and actual economy. The emphasis in Islamic finance is regularly on the compliance rather than the actual impact of finance transaction on achieving the goals of Islamic finance. The next chapter will discuss the major challenges that faced by Islamic financial system. One of the main challenges is the weak linkage with the real economic, social cost and infancy of system. They propose the way forward. This chapter, it's proposed the value-based intermediation, which entails leveraging investment accounts to capitalize on investment opportunities, increasing shares wealth through the long-term infrastructure investment sukuk, and the empowering company growth and social entrepreneurship. The next chapter discuss dedicated for Islamic social finance, including the role of three sectors: public, private, the third sector in social welfare. It concentrates on zakat and awqaf foundation and explain that how these charitable institutions can help in achieving the social goal of the Islamic economic system. The last part of this book, it is part 5, includes two chapters. The 20th chapter discuss economic development from mainstream perspective, with highlighting the philosophical foundation of the Islamic economic development, such as Tawheed, monotheism, lordship, Rububiyyah, vicegerency, Khalifa, and purification, tazkiyah. It also covers poverty elevation and the challenges faced Muslim world in achieving the desired level of development, like war, and bad health care, poverty and human rights violation, illiteracy, lack of growth, and dictatorship, and so on. So the last chapter of the book described some of the challenge.
Sharafuddin, sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Can you go back to the other one, because I just get confused. Khilafa or Khalifa? I think Khilafa. That's right.
Khalifa. Go back, brother. Brother.
Khalifa. He means Khalifa.
In which slide?
It's Khalifa.
Yeah. No, here. Khilafa.
Khalifa.
Oh.
Khalifa, not Khilafa. It
Yeah,
is
yeah,
yes. Yes, mistake.
Khilafa, I think.
Transliteration mistake. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You mean Khalifa?
Khalifa. Yes, Khalifa. I mean Khalifa. Will come. I think the next in the comment.
I think there's no mistake. Yeah, that's right. It's good. Khilafa mean vagrancy is the Khilafa. Khilafatullah fil ard.
No, the Khilfa. He wrote Khilfa.
Khilfa. No, it is wrong. They're just typing wrong typing.
Khilafa. There has to be A after L.
Yeah.
Okay. Tamam. Sorry.
Thank you,
So
Omar. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, and this part, the last chapter of the book, describe the challenges of Islamic economic as a discipline with special concentration on the.
Sharafuddin, if
Yes,
you go
Professor.
back there in the previous slide.
Yes, brother Abdul Bas. Yes.
No, I just want to make an observation. I thought that the authors would have been doing this as chapter 1 instead of making it at the last chapter or something like that.
Yeah, it is in five parts. It is in 20th. Yes.
In my understanding, it should be in the beginning of the book. Instead
Doctor,
of,
Yeah.
could I say something about that?
yeah, please, Sharif.
I have the book, my book. Put this in the first chapter, and I
Yes.
criticize it and say that is not a good point in the book, and I prefer that this to be in the end of the chapter or end of the book, because not every person is interested in Islam, but it's our role to disseminate the Islamic economic paradigm and to describe it and explain it to all the world. So I criticize my book that he puts how we get our laws and injunctions from Islam, from Quran and Sunnah and Ijtihad and
Okay, Sharif, when we go there, you can refer back to this point, okay?
okay,
Just,
but
just to
that's not
give
Okay. This
continuity
because
to,
yeah, this the philosophical foundation should be in the first. Could be. I think this much better. The philosophical foundation of the Islamic economic in the first chapters. It could be my point. Could be better. Okay. So this issue also we discuss here the challenges of Islamic economic as a discipline with special concentration of the factor behind the gap between theory and practice. This issue was discussed through the mentioning the main critique surrounding Islamic economics. It further discussed the progress of Islamic economic in its body of knowledge, methodology, and education, and explore how the future direction of Islamic economic shall be. Uh, this can you move, brother? Okay, this here the critical view of the book in terms of anthropogenic perspective. The book mentioned about the vice extravagance and waste of resource, but it did not focus on the main point. Implement the Islamic perspective of preservation. It concentrates only on consumer behavior and not on regeneration and wastage during consumption and production, which is ignored by the capitalist economic to increase its production. The point here is not the vice extravagance and waste should not be only on the consumption on the consumer behavior, but it also must be on the production also in product
yeah,
side.
Sharafuddin,
Yes, Professor.
the word you mean here is not perspective, it is perspective, P-E-R-S.
Okay, yeah, okay. So spelling error.
No,
Okay,
no,
sorry.
not it's not an spelling error. It is this is a word also. This is the correct word, but this will be the perspective will mean the potential of something.
Oh,
But here you mean perspective, which is the viewpoint from Islamic.
yes,
Okay,
perspective. Yes, not
yeah,
yes.
right.
Okay.
Okay, good, good.
Thank you. I will correct you. No, just go back, brother. I didn't cover this the second point. Yes, the author touched the circular economic, but mentioned about the conservation and consumption of the resource. The author did not propose a fully supportive vision for the circular economic in Islamic. Not this one also perspective, not prospective. Sorry
Which
for
which chapter they mentioned the circular economy? You
no.
think?
The just about this the extravagance and waste.
Okay. All right. Okay.
They talk about this one
As
and also
values, not as a
yeah,
paradigm. Yeah. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good.
Can you yes. The next point is that the book did not discuss is sorry for the wrong spell, did not discuss the effect of human action on the environmental. Instead, it has stated the moral and spiritual aspect of the economic in general. SDG are mentioned in precise way in the book, but not comprehensively. The SDGs could have been related with the concept of embedded economic to include the economic activity in social and spiritual scope, such as the climate change, providing the clean water, clean air, and proper utilization of the resource. The next point, They mentioned the human being as a Khalifa and Amin trustee, but did not discuss the role of Khalifa and concept of al-mizan in respect to circular and embedded economic, for example, ecological and sustainability, which is the major challenge nowadays for human beings. The next point, the last point, the book discussed the maqasid al-sharia, but confined to the classical concept of 5 fundamental dimensions, whereas the maqasid al-sharia could be extended to more dimensions such as ecological balance and biodiversity restoration to meet the current environment challenges in the world. This was the last point, but this textbook actually it is a very comprehensive textbook, very good textbook, but in the future if they cover this challenges which the world is facing, if they include the next textbook these challenges, it will be more comprehensive and more productive for the textbooks. Thank you so much, Professor, and this was our presentation for today.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Do you want to?
Thank you, Sharafuddin.
Do you want to
Thank you
discuss?
so much.
Okay, so let us go to Umar and
Sharif.
Umar and Sharif. Which book you are presenting?
Go ahead, Brother Sharif.
Yes, it is the fundamental of Islamic economics and finance.
From Yasin?
Yes, Hafiz Yasin and Zafir.
Okay, all right. Okay, go ahead.